welcome to The Breakdown, The Poet and the Poems, a show about just that, where we are breaking down poetry as an inspiration for people throughout their life journeys. My name is Ajima, and I will be your host for the show. Our honorable guest today is the published author, poet, and performer, Tamara J. Madison. Her most recent poetry collection, Read This Road Not Damascus. Can you help me with that? I'm always bad with pronunciation.
Damascus.
My friends are literally always correcting me with everything. It's like I have something in me to where I just automatically mess up pronunciation, guys. But Read This Road Not Damascus has been published by the Trio House Press last May and was shortlisted under the title Breast Poems in 2015 Willow Books Literature Award. So before we get into your most recent poetry collection, I think an important question would be, when did poetry begin for you, Miss Tamara Madison?
I think I've always loved poetry. I remember finding an old folder from a class project in elementary school where I had to do poetry then. And I think I've always loved poetry ever since I was little, like the sound of words and the stories that people would tell. So I've been a poetry lover all my life, pretty much.
Okay. Do you remember your first poem?
No, I don't remember my first poem. But what I do remember, I remember the library in my neighborhood, and the librarian, it was a Black librarian who actually went to school with my father. Her name was Mrs. Carolyn Outlaw. She showed me like the poetry corner in the library, like the grown-up poetry corner. That I remember. And Mrs. Outlaw is still with us. And I've actually had the opportunity to send her my books. So she kind of showed me that section. And it just like opened amazing doors for me. I remember reading Ntozake Shange's For Color Girls the first time, like bringing it home from the library, curling up in my room with the record player to read it for the first time. And I remember opening it up thinking, okay, there's a lot of this stuff that I don't understand, but I feel at home here, like this is where I belong. Yeah.
Okay. So that actually leads me into my next question. Why did you choose to do the show Breakdown?
Well, for two reasons, actually. Reason number one, I posted something recently on Instagram. Shout out to my former student and current musician, Mr. Kenny Rivers. I did a post and I posted a poem and he was like, yo, Professor Madison, I really, really like that. I like that poem, but I just wish that you could kind of break it down for me so I would understand a little bit more. Could you do that? And I thought, break it down, right? I was like, that might be kind of fun to do poems like in a casual kind of way, not in the classroom, but in a casual kind of way. So that was reason one. Reason number two was actually you. Yes, because I remember for many years, for those who don't know, you are my daughter, right? And my number one fan for life. And I am your number one fan for life. And I remember for so many years, even though you loved to read and you read very well, you were great with language, you used to always tell me, Mommy, I just don't understand the poetry. It just doesn't make sense to me. I like stories, right? And it would just like make my little heart ache, right? Because I felt like you could get it. And you were just like, that's not my thing. So when I finally sent you this last book, Read This Road Not Damascus, and you read it and you did a review and you posted a review for me and you told me that my ancestors must be proud of me, that was very special because I was like, oh my God, she gets it. She's there and she's with me and she sees that it's always been a part of her. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that was very exciting for me. So I thought about it for that reason as well. And then it just kind of makes me kind of sad. I feel like I come from a people where our language is poetry. The way that language comes from our mouths, the colorfulness of our language, you know, like the lines that people do when they trying to mag somebody like, oh, baby. you must be from the Nile because you've been swimming through my mind, all that kind of crazy stuff, right? We are poetry, and that is our language. And I think it's always kind of bothered me a little bit that people felt like poetry did not belong to them, like it only belonged in the school or in the universities or whatever. But there are other countries in the world where everybody knows that the poetry belongs to them, whether they are the cooks in the kitchens or the janitors in the buildings or the CEOs of the country or a company or whatever. Mm-hmm. They know that poetry belongs to them in their culture. So, maybe I can do something about that.
Wow. Well, I'm definitely excited about that. And I definitely agree. There was a point in time for me where I just felt like I didn't understand, mm-hmm. And with this particular book, I want to show everybody.
Yes.
And honestly, what made me interested in the book was it being a collection of different stories, perspectives, and journeys that I know would challenge my creative thinking, but also inspire me creatively as well. Mm-hmm. And, with poetry, I do feel like there are a lot of people that run away from it because they simply don't understand. Mm-hmm. And they're not, I don't know, they're not connected, like you said, to the language. Mm-hmm. Because I honestly believe there was a point in time where I didn't feel connected. And it was weird for me because I was like, my mom's a poet and this is that and the third. And I never wanted to hurt your feelings. Like I never wanted it to, because I just always felt like, well, mommy, that's your thing. That's, that was her. You were always in your element with poetry. But as I got older and I matured as a woman, and I think as I just opened my mind to different things, and also learned more about you being more than just a mom. I was able to connect with this particular book mm-hmm. in a different way than I had any of your poetry before. So, speaking of the book, how did This Road Not Damascus come about?
Well, I would say it's probably a journey of more than 10 years, right? Okay. It's collection. Some of the poems in there are quite old, but they've been refreshed and revised, and they've grown as I've grown. Mm-hmm. Some of them are like brand new, and I'm still learning their voices, right? When I read them aloud and that type of thing. So it's been a long haul, and I always wanted to put a collection together. And it's had many different forms. Like, the first version of it was under a different title. The second version of it was under a different title. Mm-hmm. And then when we got to the third version, it was clear to me, it's like, okay, it's ready, it's time. So that was one thing. And then I have to say, too, that quite honestly, to me, the poem, the book is a culmination of many conversations that I've had with my girlfriends and women mm-hmm. friends, right? Like those conversations about why do we just have to be Yemenya or Oya or Oshun? Why can't we be all three of them, right? Why do we just have to be the mother? Can't we be the mother and the sex queen and the, the virgin all at one time? Why can't, So having those conversations and understanding that if we're really about the business of growing, we do become all of those, mm-hmm. right? And we learn when to pull out Oya, or we learn when to pull out the mother goddess, or we learn when to pull out the virgin, or what have you. And so I think it was just a culmination of experiences, of conversations, of having an amazing circle of women mm-hmm. around me all of my life, and then just writing the poetry. The poetry grew as I did.
Okay. And speaking of your growth with the poetry, I really want you to go into a little bit of depth about, because when you talked about your poems and how some of them came about and grown with you, how has your relationship been with this book? Because you're also talking about the poems as if like they're people or they're like your little babies. I want you to go into depth honestly, the good, the bad. I want to know how your relationship with this book has grown, has changed, what emotions you went through, this is your baby, you know? So I really want to know how this journey has been for you with this, how this journey has been, how your relationship has changed with the book, how it's changed you. What phases did you go through? Especially for a lot of people out there that, because like you said, like a lot of people don't know, like it's been times when I've sat down and written a poem and then I come back later and I've never touched it again. I didn't like the poem. I felt like it needed something, but I didn't grow with it. I didn't develop it. Mm-hmm. So I just kind of felt like, it was just meant to just sit there and then, nothing. Mm-hmm. But hearing you talk about it, you've changed and, rearranged your poems and they've grown and changed with you. Mm-hmm. So I want you to talk a little bit about that.
Well, I would say probably when I first started writing, it was because I just loved language and it was my thing, right? And then after a while, probably like around my college years, those 20s, that type of thing, even late teens, I wrote a lot because of therapy, because I was learning things about the world, injustices and different things like that in the world. And there was stuff that was really pissing me off. And I needed to have like a place to process things. Like when you learn more about racism and sexism and different things like that and genocide and things like that, you got to have a safe place to process those things. And for me, that was in my writing. So at one particular time, it was more therapy, right? And then as I continued to grow, I started feeling like I knew and experienced amazing things. Like I know some of the most amazing people and I've had some of the most amazing experiences. So then I asked myself, how can I put that into my art form to document those things or to pay honor to those people and to those experiences, right? And then after a certain point, I felt like I didn't have all of the tools that I needed to really tell those stories or write those poems in the ways that I wanted. So after many, many years, I decided to go to grad school and get an MFA in poetry because I felt like I was missing some tools. I felt like I was talented. I knew I was talented, but there were some tools that I didn't have. So I went back to school and got some of those tools. And then after grad school, it became content and craft. Like, how do you really craft a story and bring out the magic of a moment and the magic of the poem itself? And then as far as my relationship with the book, we've gotten divorced a few times.
Yes. Right? Like, talk about the ugly. Talk about it, baby.
God, there were times when I just put it down and I'd be like, especially like if I sent it someplace and it was rejected like over and over and over and over and over again, I was just like, okay, you know what? Everybody I went to school with is getting their books and everything published. What's wrong with me? What's wrong with mine? Right. And I remember telling somebody one time, I was like, maybe my writing is just not supposed to be published in my lifetime. Maybe my daughter or my grandchildren or something will find it in an attic long after I'm dead and it'll do something for the world. And one of my dear friends, Auntie Tish, was like, you know what? I'm sorry, that's not going to happen. We're going to live to see this, right? Yeah. And so I would put it down sometimes for months at a time because I was frustrated. And then I'd start back again. Then, it was life. It was, children, husband, school, work, all of that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And that was challenging as well, to find time to just be an artist.
Right.
And then I remember one summer, I think there was one particular summer when I wasn't working. And I sat down and I read the collected works of Lucille Clifton, who is absolutely amazing. And she saved my life as a poet. She saved my life because I was like, okay, if Miss Clifton can do this with as many children as she had, dealing with eviction and getting these national awards on the day that she and her family is being put out of her, whatever the stories were, right, I can do better, right? And Lucille Clifton had passed away. And so then I would pick up the manuscript again and I'd work on it. And then at that point, it was just like that voice was like, okay, you have to get this finished, period.
Right.
And I was like, well, who's going to publish it? And the voice was like, don't worry about who's going to publish it. You need to get it finished, right?
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, I was committed to getting it finished. But there were times when, I'd sit down and I'd go in the zone and I'd be writing or typing, tapping, whatever. And I'd finish and I'd walk away and I'd come back and I'd read what I had written and I'd be like, you know what? No, we're not doing this right now.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because it was as if something had come through that I was familiar with, but not quite ready for. Right. I wasn't quite ready to grow up that much yet. So let me just put it down for a minute. But I was not putting it down for long pauses. It would always draw me back. And so there were those moments where I was like, whose voices is, what is this going on? Mm-hmm. And once I hear it or see it, I can't unhear it and unsee it. So I do have to say, once the book was published, I worked on it for over a year with the editors and the publisher and everything. And then Toni Morrison, someone who I love and appreciate and admire her work so much. Toni Morrison passed away in August. I think the book was published in May and she passed away in August. And I remember I'd be sitting down and I'd, be like preparing for a reading or whatever. And I'd be reading my manuscripts or whatever. And I'd start crying. And I'd be like, wait a minute, why am I crying? Mm. And I didn't understand why. And it happened to me about 3 times. And it was scary because I was like, okay, wait a minute. I can't do a poetry reading and just burst out into tears. And, how am I going to explain that? But it would happen every single time I was in the house by myself reading. I was like, wait a minute, I wrote this, didn't I? Or it came through me or something. Why am I crying? So after Toni Morrison passed away, everybody was posting quotes and pictures and all of that type of thing from her. And I ran across the quote that I had seen before from her. And I don't remember it verbatim, but I'll try to say it as best I can. If there is a book you've been wanting to read that you cannot find, you must write it. Mm. And once I saw that quote, I was like, oh, that's why I cry. Because I'm finally reading the book that I've been wanting to read.
Yeah.
And I have to say, unlike anything else I've ever written, when I do go back and I read it, I'm always finding something new in a different kind of way. So I'm still learning this book and learning the voice and the spirit guide that's in it and all of that type of thing. So it's been a rocky relationship. And, I have to say, unlike some of my other projects, I don't consider this one my baby. I feel like I'm more the baby of the project. And
wow.
Yeah. And I feel like listening to this voice and these poems was a rite of passage for me. So I feel like I'm more the book's baby than the book is mine, if that makes sense.
It does. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And I appreciate it grow so much.
Your honesty, it's very, very real. And I do believe that in any creative projects and stuff, it is a journey. And a lot of people don't know the other side. They see the finishing product and everything, but they don't, they don't know the journey that it has taken to push and keep going and get it here. So I would just like to take the chance to just congratulate you. As I've said before, I'm so very proud of you. I love the book, and I would like to get into just a little bit of the book. I don't want to do too much because I really want people to get out there and get the book if you don't already have it. But since this is the breakdown, I really do. I think it would be fun. A few of my favorite pieces in the book, I would really like to just talk about and discuss. And if you feel appropriate, do a breakdown on one of the poems. Okay. For those out there that may be poetry lovers, and for people out there that might be a little curious about poetry or new to it or getting their feet wet or just wanting to understand it. So one of my favorite pieces in here, and it's funny to me because I already know. Tongue blade.
Blade. Okay.
Tongue blade.
Right. Tongue blade. What page is it on?
Tongue blade is page 31, and it says unto it for my daughter. So, would you like to read Tongue blade, or
would you like for me to read it?
For the breakdown, why don't I read, and then maybe you read it. And because I want you to read it from the writing perspective. So I would read it more so from a perspective of somebody just reading the book, or and then I want you to come in, and then I've got a couple questions afterward, if that's cool with you.
Okay, so you're going to read it first, and then I read it, and then you'll give me your question.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So, Tongue blade for my daughter. Tempting 17, you woman child. The sweetest spin, the sweetest spin in your mama's softest song, lilt in her litany of love, you, milk and moon drizzled on parched night, your tongue lash, our release, your mother's muted screams.
Tongue blade for my daughter. Tempting 17, you, woman child, the sweetest spin in your mama's softest song, lilt in her litany of love, you milk and moon drizzled on parched night. Your tongue lash, our release, your mother's muted screams.
Okay. So let's break it down.
Okay.
Let's break it down. Tongue blade. Where'd you get that from?
All right. So for those of you who don't know, Ajima is my only womb daughter, like daughter from my body. Tongue blade. I thought of tongue blade because a blade slashes. It cuts and it can kill. It's very powerful and it's dangerous. It's a weapon, right? Mm-hmm. And you, my beloved daughter, were very mouthy, right? And you have, as people can obviously see from you hosting this interview, you have a gift of words. Words and language are one of your powers as well, even though yours is different than mine. It very, very much is. And so someone else, just like me, someone else can say something in the room, but you can turn around and say the same thing, and it has a little to it, right? A little acid, a little hit to it. So the title came from Tongue blade, and that interesting phase that we go through as a teenager, when we're sick of our moms and we're ready to get out that house and we're ready to do our own thing. So we think, and we can't wait to do it. And we're just biding time, biding time. We are full of ourselves. We smell ourselves, and we're ready to tell everybody and let everybody know about it, right? And some people can do that much more articulately and fluidly and much more readily than other people. And you were one of those people who was very, very strong-willed and spoke your mind. And so the idea is that you are the tongue blade and the slasher, but at the same time, you are the sweetest spin, right? You're also the softest thing, the most beautiful thing, the most loving thing. And the line, my favorite line is, you, milk and moon drizzled on parched night. If something is parched, it's thirsty. And you are the thing that can quench that thirst. So it was about describing your power, but both sides or all sides of it, right? Mm-hmm. And the last line, your tongue lash, our release. And I was thinking about how there were things that my mother would not say in public or did not talk about, but I do, right? And I have an edge that my mother didn't have with certain things, even though she had her own edge. And likewise, there are things that my daughter will say and ways that she can cut with her tongue, right? That I don't. But I look at it as a power. And I feel like with each generation, each woman gets to speak the things that her mothers before her may not have been able to say for whatever reason.
And I think that's amazing. And I think besides me connecting to the poem because it was about me, I also appreciated it as well because, especially in our community, mother-daughter relationships aren't always that healthy. Mm-hmm. And we don't talk about the difficulties in mother-daughter relationships as in other relationships as well, but we also don't talk about how the dynamics change. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And just so many factors in that. And a lot of the time it can have a negative impact when we don't talk about it, or we don't release things or experience things and all of that kind of stuff. So I appreciate the poem a lot because I know it was a point in time where our relationship was hard, was very, very hard. And, you know, to be able to have something creative, a creative outlet to express that. And then it's like, okay, now we can go back and read and laugh about the poem and appreciate it in a different way and all of that kind of stuff. So I really do appreciate it. And I hope, you know, it inspires other mothers who could be dealing with anything or, you know, not being able to express it because people don't get it, you know, or people won't get it, or, you know, you might get enough of just picking up the phone and venting to somebody. You know, I hope it inspires other people to have an outlet with things like this, that, you know, life journeys, like you said, life journeys, raising a child, raising a daughter, raising a me.
A you. That's a whole nother other.
Raising a me. So I did have another poem that I thought would be a great breakdown because it's a different perspective. So I would like for you to break this poem down. We can do it if you would like. We can do it again where I read it as just a reader and then you read it and break it down.
Okay.
If you're comfortable with that. I don't want to do too many for the people because we are definitely, this is the breakdown now. So we got to break. We got to break it down.
Yes, it is.
So it is the breakdown. So we're going to break it down. Page 38. Hypothesis, Poet Questions, King James.
Oh, you want to go?
You should have known that I was going to choose. For the breakdown, we got to be, you know, all of the pieces, guys, I'm telling you, all of the pieces are great. All of the pieces are great. But a couple of these, you're going to be like, hold up. You're going to see some sides, baby. So, God bleeds through rivers and trees. Feathers, furs, and scales, concrete, shimmers among the least of crystals. Perhaps you kill because you cannot find your God, staring back in the mirror, or do you kill because you see God when gazing at me? Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it.
Hypothesis, Poet Questions, King James. God bleeds through rivers and trees, feathers, furs, and scales, concrete, shimmers among the least of crystals. Perhaps you kill because you cannot find your God staring back in the mirror. Or do you kill because you see God when gazing at me? So to clarify, when the book says King James, I'm talking particularly about the King James of the King James Bible, right? So that's one of the reasons why there are certain epigraphs in there where you see like little Bible verses and then there's a poem afterwards. It's not at all to be religious for people who, you know, are curious about that. It's about responding to things in the Bible and things that have shaped our culture. So, you know, I was thinking about, when I wrote this poem, I was thinking about people who consider themselves to be so God-fearing and such devout believers and whatever religion they are, right? and how sometimes some of those people are the very people who are adamantly destroying God's creations. So the question for me is, if you are so God loving and God fearing, why is it so easy for you to kill? Right? If you are really that connected to your God, your source, the Almighty, or whatever, why is it so easy for you to kill? Why do we have genocide on the planet? Why do we have police brutality? Why do we have domestic violence? Just like it shows up in all kinds of ways, right? With people who are supposed to be very devout about their religion or spirituality or whatever you want to call it. And so that's the reason for the line, perhaps you kill because you cannot find your God. Maybe you're not as connected to your spirituality as you say you are. And then in the last line, or do you kill because you see God when gazing at me? I think it's very easy for people to try to it's very easy for people to destroy what they cannot understand or what they cannot control. And so this poem was in response to that. And I think the way we define power in most of the planet, power most often for people is the ability to control. And if I cannot control, then I will destroy. That's the way a lot of people look at power. And I'm not just talking about individual people. It could be a husband and a wife, and it might be the wife that feels that way, right? It could be family members. It could be nations upon nations. It could be a civil war between nations. My thought, though, is it takes a lot more complexity and depth to learn how to honor what you don't understand and what you can't control, to learn how to get along with what you can't control. How about that? Right? And so it was to question those things and to speak to those things in particular.
I love it.
Thank you.
I do. And I think one of the important things, and one thing that also stands out about these collection of stories is you are bold. You're bold. And I'm an advocate for some bold women. I tell you, I love it. I do have one more. I know we are on time schedule, but I would really like to go over one more poem before we wrap up this interview. I really enjoy, like I said, I've enjoyed all of the poems in the collection of stories. So Saint Ola is also one of my favorites. I know this is now we getting a little, we was a little sassy before, so now we getting a little sensitive.
What page is it on? I should know.
Saint Ola is on page 12. And I specifically I didn't originally know if I was going to choose this one, but this past year, just connecting with my grandmother's spirit and energy over Mother's Day and everything, and just feeling her and seeing her and hearing stories that I, probably wasn't ready for as a child, but didn't hear before, and just seeing her in a different way. I want you to, read this poem and break it down for everybody.
Saint Ola for Mama. Quote, unfit for the pulpit, quote, end quote. With Bible leather strapping your tongue, your throat, grosgrain tying your tongue, they force-fed, broke your jaws and legs, pried open your lips, crammed their gospels into your mouths until, drowning in waters holy, you joined the pantheon of mistress martyrs baptized, evangelized, though never a mass, hymn, or scripture memorializing your name. That's a hard poem for me. The breakdown for this poem is that my mother, her part of her name was Ola. Her name was Mariola. And Ola means jewel in an African dialect. I'm not sure which one. It means jewel. And my mother was the only daughter of a Baptist minister and the granddaughter of a Baptist minister. So there was a lineage of ministers in her family. And she was the only daughter, and those particular ministers believed that women were not fit for the pulpit. You didn't do that. You could do all kinds of other things in the church, but you were not called to preach. That was just how she was raised and what I was taught as a young child. And as a result of that, as strong as my mother was, there were moments when I saw her acquiesce and feel like it was not her place to speak. We had a family reunion one time, and she was the youngest child, and she had two older brothers. And our family had asked that all three of them speak to the next generation, right? Because they had so many things to share, and we wanted to learn from them. And my mother just did not want to speak. She felt it was not her place. She felt like her oldest brother should be the one to speak because he was the pastor. And we really had to convince her, Mommy, there are things that you know that they don't know. There were stories and things that were entrusted to you that they don't know. Mm-hmm. And seeing her like that made me just kind of feel like, you know what? That right there, we're not going to do that anymore. And then for me as a child, as a young teenager, to be told that I, regardless as to how well I spoke and how talented and intelligent I was never supposed to be a preacher, right? That equated to me as you're not good enough. You're second class. I don't care what anybody said or how they tried to explain it to me. That's what that meant. So I just took my happy self on someplace else where I could develop my talents and my gifts. And that's why we have this book, right? Mm-hmm. But that was challenging for me because I felt that there was no home for me and my gifts in that place because I wasn't going to be quiet. I was going to continue asking questions, and that just wasn't the place to do it. And things have changed a great deal since then. There are a lot of the women in the ministry of all kinds of faiths, but back in the day, that was not the case. Right. And to me, it just made my heart ache a little bit because, bless you, because I felt like there were so many things that women had to offer, but they were being barred from certain spaces, especially at that time.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Well, I think that was a great breakdown.
And you know what, Ajima, I have to say too, that ties back to tongue blade. That's why the tongue blade is so very important because other voices have been silenced.
So right. And I feel like you did that with a lot of these stories in here. You know, a lot of them kind of tie into each other and some of them make the other one make sense. So it's just, like I said, people, it's just a great read. It really, really is. And, you know, before we wrap up, I just wanted to see if you had anything specific. I know we covered some things today and we got into it. We definitely did.
Yes, we did.
But was there anything specific about the book that you want people to know? Is there any advice that you would like to give to anyone that is developing a book or developing something creatively and could be having trouble or just going on a journey and trying to get to where you're at? What you're going to leave them with, Miss Madison? What you going to leave them with?
Oh my God, the pressure, right? About the book, I will simply say this. The title itself, Threed This Road Not Damascus, comes from a famous Bible story. Okay. Where there was someone, I think it was named Paul, who was on the road to Damascus, and he saw this bright light. The bright light knocked him down, and that was his enlightenment or what have you, right? So the book simply suggests that there's more than one way to enlightenment, right? There's more than one way to free yourself. There are many journeys to get to that one place. This is one of them. And this book also questions some of those more traditional patriarchal ways and manly ways of doing things, because we're not all going to get there by the same road. And that was the biggest purpose of the book. It was also to give honor to my ancestors and to those who did not have the freedom to speak the way that I do. As far as people who are on a journey right now in terms of whatever they're creating, whatever, I don't care whether it's a book, a dance, a clothing line, building a new building, a community, a business, or whatever it is, I just encourage people to stay true to themselves and always be creative. When something happens and there's a glitch in the system or something tries to deter you, but you have a vision and you really do see that there is a need or a place for that vision, stick to your vision. And if a door closes, go to another door or build a door and create a portal or whatever it is, because the world desperately needs that. And for people who are sharing their stories in whatever way they share them, whether it's, sitting up with your girlfriends at the kitchen table and a cup of coffee, or writing a book, or doing a vlog, or creating a film or whatever, know that your stories are valid. It may not be somebody else's story, but it's valid. I had a woman tell me many years ago, she was like, Tam, she said, I really love to write poetry and this, that, and the other, but I just can't do it like you do it. And I just feel like there's no reason to do it. And I'm like, wait, right? Let's say we're in a room and I do my thing and I reach 90 people. Who's going to reach the other 10 if there's 100 people in the room? Maybe the way you tell a story is in a way and in a language or with examples that they understand better than they understand it from me.
And that's right? Okay.
Yeah. And I think part of the problem with our culture is that we see famous stories and celebrities and who they are and what they're doing, but we forget that every single day we are creating history and stories, and those are valid. Those experiences are valid. So tell your story, know your story, create it and tell it, and know that you have the right to change it, right? If you don't like the way that your story is going, rewrite it or retell it and recreate, because that's what we're here for. And that is how we share our humanity, when we share our stories. You did an amazing job, Miss Jima.
Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. And I want to just take the time to thank you for that. That was amazing, that closing. And also thank you for the book. Anybody that reads this would thank you for the book. The stories, the connection, just everything. I also want to take the time and thank you all for watching. Please leave us some feedback. Let us know. Leave some comments. And please join they can subscribe to your website, correct?
Yes, there is an area where you can sign up on the website for blast and announcements. My website is Tamara J Madison. That's TAMARA, the letter J, Madison, MADISON.com. And you have to put the J in there because there's another Tamara Madison who's a poet, right? And she and I have met on Facebook, right? And so I always use the J so that people can distinguish. And you can find everything on my website, my calendar of where I have events or workshops coming up, All of the books are there. If you want to buy autograph or signed copies, you can get them off the website. And there are also reviews there because there's a podcast on the book. There's an interview on the book. And then there are a few reviews that have come out in some literary journals. And I love to get feedback from people. People can respond to the website and share, feedback or anything like that they want. And they're welcome to post reviews on Amazon or Barnes & Noble and Goodreads as well.
That's great. I just want to end off by saying, guys, read some poetry, read a story, open your mind to creativity, whether it be your first poem, your first book of poetry, or a different book, something different that you've never read. Try something new. It made a difference in my life. And,
How did it make a difference for you? I'm curious about that. How did it make a difference for you, especially since this is the first book that you said you really connected to in poetry? How did it make a difference for you?
It made a big difference to me because it just, in a way, it showed me how far I came and how much I've developed and opened my mind just from being a child, and just my perspective of things changed a lot because some of these poems I've heard, some of these poems I've read, but not in the same way. So it kind of made me self-reflect a lot because sometimes when you're going through life and you're so busy and you're doing day to day and you're going and you're going and you're going, you don't even realize how far you've come mentally, emotionally, and all of these things. So I think for me, it definitely was a self-reflect. And it's just helped me to just open my mind to just being creative and seeing so many different perspectives, not being so judgmental and so forward, and just being open to just the possibility of just a lot of different things. So once again, thank you all for, your time. And like I said, get out there, read something, guys, and not on your phone. Just pick up a book, go to a library, read. If you know someone that's a writer, read their work, and I can't wait for the next breakdown.
Thank you.
One more time, guys, visit tamarajmadison.com. Subscribe, leave comments, leave feedback, and get the book. We're not talking about it for no reason. Can you put your book up? Because mine's is.
Yes, I can. You know what? I have a better copy. Hang on. This is my beat up reading copy, right? With all the
I've got my notes and stuff.
There we go.
Yes.
And I want to say thank you to my press, Trio House Press. I think they did an amazing job. The cover design, that's a symbol that I designed and all of that kind of stuff. That is actually the symbol of the three-breasted woman. And I created that for the book, and they did an amazing job allowing me to have a little bit of suggestion about that. And I think the cover designer was amazing. And I have to say too, folks, one of the amazing things about poetry is that sometimes there's a whole world or a universe in one poem, and it's short. It doesn't take a lot of time, right? But it can take you on a journey. So if you don't have a lot of time, I think poetry is a great place to start. And there are people of all ages. There are some men that I know that write amazing work. Younger men, older work, there's all kinds of stuff out there. So thank you, Miss Jima.
Not a problem at all, guys. Until the next breakdown.
All right, we're signing out of the breakdown, and we'll see you soon.
All right, guys, have a blessed one.
Bye-bye.